Jay has suddenly begun arriving late to his dates with Audrey. This is odd, but even stranger. He has started to dress nicer and actually fix his hair. Audrey begins to come to her own conclusions, and after he shows up with red lipstick on his forehead, her suspicions are practically confirmed. But is it what it seems? Before we delve further, if you're new to Villain Nation, please remember to subscribe and turn the notifications on so you won't miss out on any of our Descendants videos. What happened? What's wrong? Jay demanded worriedly, his eyes wide as he looked at his girlfriend. Audrey swallowed as she realized that he almost seemed like he might come closer to her. Jay, Audrey says that you came to you guys' date with red lipstick on your forehead. Mal informed him, and Audrey could almost feel the anger and hurt radiating from the purple-haired girl. Mal had known Jay for the longest and was therefore the most injured by his betrayal of them. As they say, I'm a dog, Dude suddenly piped up, and Audrey's eyes remotely shifted to the dog for a moment before returning to meet Jay's gaze. Jay looked suddenly very confused as he stared at the lot of them. Red lipstick? He questioned, his voice somewhat small as he furrowed his brow and considered Mal's earlier statement. On my forehead? He added, appearing even more bum-fuzzled as he looked down at the floor in thought. However, after only a moment, his eyes widened in recognition as he gazed at Evie. It was her. Jay pointed to the brunette, and Audrey's gaze snapped to Evie. Mal raised an eyebrow as she glanced between the two oldest members of the Core Four. Carlos looked exceedingly disgusted, and Evie was just sitting there with her jaw slackened in surprise. Me? Evie squeaked. When did I do it? Do you remember this morning? Jay asked, and Evie suddenly looked very thoughtful. Audrey looked back at her boyfriend skeptically, not sure what to think at this moment. Oh, Eves insisted he had a fever this morning, and that was when she felt his head, Carlos called out suddenly, and they all looked to the DeVille boy. Audrey furrowed her brow as she took in that new thought. Evie suddenly looked very sheepish as her memory seemed to jog. Mal had now let go of Audrey's hand and almost looked as if she would laugh as she leaned against the couch. Audrey was completely shocked at this development. Jay really wasn't cheating on her, and it was just Evie being her usual caring self? It almost seemed too good to be true. She scanned her mind quickly, trying desperately to ensure that there were values in this equation that didn't add up. Unfortunately, she immediately thought of Jay's sudden change in dress. Well, why have you been dressing so nice lately and fixing your hair so perfectly? Audrey demanded, not sure if she wanted to know the answer, but finding that she definitely needed to know it. Once again, it's E's fault. She's been holding him down, brushing his hair, and making him change whenever she even thinks that she hears that you two have a date, Mal explained with a wide grin. Evie gaped at Mal with just a hint of offense. I'm just trying to make him presentable, Evie cried, and Mal chuckled under her breath, finally allowing herself to enjoy the situation a bit more. Evie, I told you to stop mother henning. It never ends well, Mal finally told the brunette, and Carlos laughed aloud in response to the somewhat older girl's statement. But Em, Evie protested immediately, and Audrey somewhat zoned out as she looked at the boy across from her. Jay was looking at the two girls that were currently engaged in playful argument, but he turned his gaze to her quickly. He offered a slight smile to her, and she suddenly felt relief wash over her as she realized that it had all just been a giant mistake. However, just after that, there was an immense guilt that overcame her. How could she have doubted him? That was so terribly unfeeling of her, especially after she had so often been the sufferer of the effects of unfeeling people. Audrey glanced at Evie quickly as the brunette started scooting closer to Audrey in an attempt to get nearer to Mal. Audrey shared a meaningful glance with Jay, trying to signal him to come with her. He looked at her somewhat questioningly, but as she stood up, he quickly got the message. He got up with her and she started out towards Evie's back door. She could hear his footsteps not too far behind her, and as they exited the house, those footsteps were soon all that she could hear. She slowed down significantly as he started to stroll through the grass. He hesitantly approached her from the side, walking parallel to her. Audrey could feel his gaze upon her, and she swallowed a bit, spotting a bench around the edge of Evie's house over at the fire pit. Audrey headed over to it, sitting down carefully. Jay mimicked her movements, resting next to her as he placed his elbows on his knees and looked over at her quietly. They silently sat for a few minutes, and she knew that he was waiting for her to speak first. He was always understanding that way. "Jay, I'm so sorry that I ever doubted you," Audrey expressed, their eyes meeting. She felt her heart ache as she watched him nod, a serious expression on his face as he eyed her. "I was so horribly stupid, insensitive, and rash," she told him, and he just watched her, neither agreeing with her statement nor disagreeing. "I should never have doubted you. You've always been so understanding and kind, and I'm always just the selfish, bratty princess," Audrey told him, trying to hold back the urge to sob as it truly dawned upon her just how horrible she had been to him in her quickness to make assumptions. "I'm so sorry," she finished, turning her head away from him in shame as she closed her eyes. After a few moments, however, she felt a gentle touch to her chin, and he turned her head back so that she was facing him. He was now sitting up straighter, and he was leaning near her as he held her chin gently, making her look at him. "Hey, you're not a brat," Jay assured her, stroking her chin with his thumb as he searched her face. He then met her eyes once again. Audrey swallowed as she studied him, wondering what he was going to say next. "You were a little rash, but I completely understand. You've had a bad time with guys, and I know sometimes my old reputation can precede me," Jay expressed somewhat sadly as he shifted his hand so that it was cupping her cheek. Audrey immediately shook her head in negation, reaching up and grabbing at his wrist with both hands as she held on to him firmly. "No, that wasn't it at all. It was entirely because of me and my own insecurities," Audrey explained to him. She saw his eyes soften. She set her jaw a bit as she considered what she was about to admit. "Jay, you are the greatest boy that I've ever known." She was seriously putting her heart on the line, but she was almost completely certain that he wouldn't disappoint her. Sure enough, his eyes lit up slightly at her words, and he brought up his other hand to tuck a lock of hair behind her ear. He then rested that hand on her bare cheek as he gazed at her. "I love you, Jay," she confessed, and he just grinned at her before leaning in. She closed her eyes in anticipation, waiting for his lips to meet her own. He kissed her softly, and she couldn't help but smile a bit against his lips. She trailed her hands up to his arms, resting one on his shoulder, as she brought the other one up to the back of his neck to tangle in his hair. However, she suddenly heard a scream, successfully pulling them out of their own little world. They both jerked in surprise and pulled away from one another, looking behind them as Evie, Carlos, and Dude charged out the back door with Mal right behind them. Evie was giggling and squealing like a mad woman, and Carlos was laughing like crazy, with Dude barking insanely as they all tried to escape Mal. It was a rather ridiculous sight to witness Evie actually running, and Carlos skittering around as he was with Dude on his heels. It was even more humorous when no one realized that Mal was chasing them. No, don't get us, we're good!" Evie cried, and Mal stayed right behind her as she pursued the taller girl. "Oh, I beg to differ, dear sister. Don't you remember your statement about me being hopeless without you keeping me in line?" Mal demanded, but she was laughing, and it was easy to see that she was just having a good time messing with Evie. "What did me and Dude do?" Carlos yelled between laughs as he ran behind a tree. However, Evie and Mal were right behind him, and he had to take off running once again. "You agreed, and the dog's your sidekick," Mal explained quickly as they zipped across the grass, heading for the front yard. They soon disappeared, their voices ringing out as Mal chased them. Audrey and Jay blinked and shook their heads, chuckling as the two girls, the boy and the dog, Audrey turned her gaze to look at Jay, and he returned his eyes to hers. "Oh, and, I love you too," Jay expressed with a grin, and Audrey smiled widely as they both leaned into one another, hopefully not to be interrupted this time. As their lips finally connected once again, and he scooted closer to her, pulling her nearer, Audrey couldn't help but think how glad she was that it all was just a big misunderstanding. I'm Lady Blah Blah, and as always, thanks for watching. And if you enjoyed this story, feel free to check out another one. And don't forget to put a like, subscribe, and share this video with your villain friends.